And welcome back to Sunday Square Off. 2 months into the legislative session, one of the major storylines is Republican lawmakers are rebelling against Republican Governor Doug Ducey on some major issues. It's more than a political fight. It involves our money and how each side wants to spend it or doesn't want to spend it. And we're back with Lorna Romero and Chris Hurstum. The two major standoffs right now are whether to bring Arizona's tax code in line with the new federal tax code and whether to ditch Arizona's new vehicle registration fee. The irony, Ducey is being painted here as the tax and spender, while the legislative Republicans are saying, don't make us do that. Lorna, you work for Jan Brewer in her second term. Is this a classic case of second-term-itis by the governor kind of going in a different direction, maybe a little softer on tax cuts?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's second-term-itis. I think there's always a healthy tension between the executive and the legislature. And I think sometimes, depending on the legislative session and the makeup of the legislature, it stands out a little bit more than other times of year. And so obviously you have 90 lawmakers down there with different varying opinions and varying priorities, and a governor who has his own set of priorities. Sometimes they align well, sometimes they don't. And so I don't think it's necessarily a case of how Ducey is governing his second term. I think it's just what the ebbs and flows of the legislative process and the interaction with the governor's office. And
well, I'll give it to you, Chris, because the sense I get is you have Republicans who are very concerned about running in 2020 and the way some of this will look for them.
Yeah. You know, I'm so old, I can just tell you, I have interacted with 8 governors, back to Babbitt. And every one of them that is fortunate enough to get a second term, or hangs around long enough for a second term, they tend to all become a bit more pragmatic in their second term. They aren't up for re-election again to that particular office. They become a little less ideological, and the word legacy starts to come into play. I think the governor's own natural fiscal conservatism, he wants to put more money into the rainy day fund. He can do that by doing nothing and getting that federal conformity issue and $150 million and helping his budget and so forth. Same with the registration fee, the vehicle registration fee that's bringing in $185 million. You sort of want to get your hands on that money and do some things in your last term that you were more careful about maintaining an image for re-election. And that's a natural dynamic. And you've got, you know, former Speaker Mesnard, who's now in the Senate, who's basically telling the governor, go make your deal with the Democrats on your budget if you're not going to go along with us on this stuff. You didn't hear any of that discussion in his first term. So this is a natural dynamic that occurs, but the governor holds all the cards because he can veto a budget, and in those budget negotiations, he may need some Democratic votes. Be fascinating to watch.
But again, the issue, the governor on these two issues, these are passive tax increases. He says they're not, but they are.
Sure they are.
Well,
and this is the governor who said, I'm going to cut taxes every year I'm in office.
But I think you need to go back and remember that, especially with the public safety fee, vehicle registration fee, that was something that was passed by the legislature. The governor did sign it, but that was a policy issue that the legislature decided to pursue last session. So I think that sometimes get lost on folks. Now some people are upset with the amount of the fee, but that was a decision made by them as well. So I don't think it shouldn't be so easy to let them off the hook on that. But I wouldn't say that these are de facto tax increases.
Remember, we saw Jan Brewer, and this lady right here was a member of her team that helped get this done. We saw her welcome, you're going to hate it when I say this, welcome Obamacare into Arizona by using Medicaid expansion. And the governor rolled over Republican leadership and used Democratic votes to enact that. This is not unusual in a second term for a governor to want to establish a legacy and do some good things for Arizona.
I disagree with some of what he said about the Obamacare necessarily, but he raises a good point that when the governor wants to get done what he or she wants to get done, they're going to do whatever it takes for it to happen. So sometimes, like in Governor Brewer's situation, we had a coalition with Republicans and Democrats to get Medicaid restoration across the board. I'm sure the Governor Ducey will be able to negotiate with Republicans and get what he wants.
And the Democratic
okay, so let's go to the end game here, because there's a budget and lots of issues on the table. So it looks like there are going to be negotiations. J.D. Mesnard saying go talk to them. How is all this going to play out as the session winds down, maybe as late as June?
Well, the Democrats are playing it really cool. They're doing exactly what they should. The Democratic leadership, Bradley in the Senate and Fernandez in the House, they're not saying anything. They're just sitting back, watching the Republicans start to spit at each other, and they will play it cool. And if Doug Ducey needs some Democratic votes, they'll have a list of things that they want. That's how the process has worked for many decades in Arizona.
Yeah, definitely. And we always say this, those of us who've been down at the legislature for a long time, there's always a blow up with the budget at some point, and then all the pieces come back together. So that's why I don't think this situation's out of the norm. Sometimes people get a little heated and testy on certain issues, but that's what negotiations are about.
But out of the norm, you have really close majorities, slim majorities for Republicans in the House and the Senate. That does give Democrats some room to bargain here, doesn't it?
That's true, but we are only, well, we're just starting March, so there's still plenty of time to negotiate a budget with Republicans.
True.
All right. Chris Herster, Lorna Romero, thanks so much for joining us.